Right, the last thing we're going to look at, oh no, two more things to look at. Marketing and recruitment is the next topic. Once you've got your project set up, the next thing that you want to do is to try and promote it. And there are lots of ways of doing that. The first thing, of course, is to create various websites. And the essential one is the Family Tree DNA project website. But it also helps to have other resources set up to act as bait, if you like, to lure people into your surname project. The Guild profile page is something that everyone should do. How many people have got their Guild profile page set up as a matter of interest? So, right. For some reason, only about 30% of Guild members have got their profile pages set up. I don't know why people haven't bothered. It's a free resource, it's very easy to use.
It's not bothered, it's time.
It takes about an hour.
Or less than that.
Yeah.
About 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You just get your name out there.
It works.
Once you've got that page out there, it appears in search engine results and people find you. If you've just got your name in the register, people don't find the Guild website. They don't know about it. All my hits for my one name study come from people finding my pages on the website. I don't get people inquiring because they found me in the register. They find my pages first.
Can I just add that it's very flattering to look at your profile page. You can actually find the number of people who have had a look at it.
That's right, yes. Well, that's what I've got here. These are page views for I've got a Family Tree DNA website, I've got a profile page, and I've got a blog. These are my page views in August. I've got 2013. I didn't realise I was a future artist.
You're looking well.
But you can see that each attracts a slightly different audience, and also it's interesting to see the ratio between the US and the UK. The Family Tree DNA website attracts many more people from the US. The profile page is very good for getting people from the UK, but the blog is for me anyway, is the one that gets the most hits. August is quite a low month. Not as many people visit websites in August. My blog is probably a bit different from everyone else's because I've got a lot of DNA stuff on there, and general DNA stuff, and I find it's the DNA stuff that gets the most hits. But with the blogs, you've got two main platforms, Google Blogger and WordPress, both very easy to use. I'll look at those a bit later. The other thing that's worth doing is setting up a Facebook group. We've now got 1 billion people on Facebook, 1/7 of the world's population on Facebook, so you're more likely to find people with your surname on Facebook than anywhere else. And something I haven't yet done, you can create your own dedicated one name study website. Right, this is just something I was going to show you about my Family Tree DNA project website. Because I don't have a website, one name study website, I actually use my Family Tree DNA project website to publish outline pedigrees for all the people who are in my project. And then I put them into groups, and for each group I put a little description at the beginning there, just to explain the rationale for putting people in that particular group. And I don't put the full tree, it's just the male line, and I just put the name of the person, their birth dates, and the person they've married. And I find that that page actually shows up on search engine results, and I do sometimes get people contacting me simply because they found their name on there. Well, not their own name, but the name of one of their ancestors. This is to show you the profile page. And you will find the link in the members room. It's free to do, but it's a very standard format, which I think is actually good because it encourages you to think in a very structured way, and also it means that it's very easy when you're going from one surname to another. You get everything's arranged in a standardised way, so it's easy to compare one name studies across the board. You've got various options here. You can add a counter, which is what I do to see all the people who arrive at my website. And you can preview the page. You can only add one picture to the profile page, that's the limitation. And it's really as simple as typing in a copy, clicking on save and publish, and then it's all out there. And there's an example of, that's Paul Billington's. Right, a blog is another easy way to publish your results on the web. They're free, very easy to use. Publication is instant, and it's another way of publishing as you go along. You don't have to worry about deadlines. I know in the past people used to produce newsletters, and I couldn't imagine doing a newsletter and having everything on paper and then having to cope with deadlines and printing everything out and mailing it out. With a blog, you just, when you want to write something, you just publish it there and then, and it's out there. You can customise it. You can add all these tabs here. You can add all sorts of gadgets. You can add a Google search box and various other things. And it can also be a very collaborative process, which I'll show you shortly. This is the process of editing a blog. If you can use Word, if you can attach pictures to emails, you'll be able to edit a blog. This is me editing one of my pages here. You can see you've got this toolbar across the top. You can adjust the font, the text. You can set things in bold, italics, uppercase. You can add links, you can insert pictures. So it's literally WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. You type it in, and then you click on update to update the page, or publish if you haven't already published the page. You can revert to the draft, you can preview it, and then once it's published, it's out there. But if you make a mistake, you can also go back and change the page. And I quite often do go back and change the pages that I've done. And the nice thing is you can add lots of pictures as well, and there's no limit as to how many pictures you can add, and you can format those, you can change the size of the pictures.
What are you doing with BlogFire? Can you do it via Goons, or is it a commercial?
No, the two main ones are Google Blogger and WordPress. They're both free. It's free software. Google Blogger is probably the easiest one for most people to cope with. WordPress is more customisable and is more for people who've got more technical skills.
I would recommend Google.
And the nice thing about the Google blogs is that Google automatically adds you to their search engine rankings as soon as you've written the blog. And I find that my blog pages show up very, very highly on the search engine result. Each post that you make on the blog, it creates a separate web page, and each web page is indexed separately by Google. This is an example of a post I did back in 2007. And I just wrote a little piece about one particular tree, and you can see at the bottom I wrote here, the best hope now is to find a living Prue's descendant from this tree who is willing to take a DNA test. Nothing happened for several years, and then about 2 years ago I suddenly got an email from someone from this tree. He had the surname and he wanted to do a DNA test.
And he found this through your blog?
He found that he happened to find my blog. And he actually asked to have the DNA test done. And a blog can also be a very collaborative process. You can, if you want, you can set up the blog so that multiple people can do the editing, if you're lucky enough to find someone to help you. But it's also a collaborative process because if you just write something, sometimes you'll get comments appearing on your blog. And I wrote a little piece here about the Prue's surname. It doesn't matter if you don't know everything about the surnames. If you write something out there, people will read it, they will contact you, and they will then contribute their knowledge. And in this particular case, it was Andrew Minard, one of our guild members, who read the post, and he actually added some very useful information. And then I had another chap in America coming along who provided some more useful information. So it's an organic process. But if you don't put the information out there, then you just won't know that there are all these people there to help you. So I'd recommend don't wait until it's finished, because your work will never be finished. But the more you publish, the more you will find out, and the more other people will be able to collaborate with you.
So how often do you update your blog then? Is it?
It varies considerably.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do a few posts a month. Sometimes I go for months when I don't do anything. Sometimes I can do a couple in a week.
Right.
It's just whenever I feel like it. I started off very, very enthusiastically doing lots and lots of posts, as everyone does, and then found I just couldn't keep up the rate. But I do try and post fairly regularly, at least once a month, if I can. It all depends on whether or not I've got something to say. I mean, it's finding the time to do the posts as well. It does sometimes take time to compose them.
I'll reiterate that. I think also if you've got a Facebook group for your women studying, you tend to just put a quick comment in Facebook, and it seems to trigger off the response that you're on anyway. So.
But what I've tried to do on my blog is try and get a post on each different tree, because I find it's the keywords that are the really useful things. So when I've got branches in different places, I'm trying to do a post on each of those branches, and I monitor the results, and I can see the results that the keywords that people are using to find my blog. So sometimes it can be very, very specific terms. If you've got to mention someone's ancestor on your page, then they will find you. This is an example of a Facebook group. This is my group for the surname Cruz. You can see I have 165 members in the group. It's a very rare surname. There are probably no more than about 200 or 300 living people with the surname. I've never had. I've got more Cruzes together in one place on Facebook than on anywhere else. I don't really do that much with the group. I just let people post every now and then. If I find an interesting article like this particular one of a writer who's Liz Cruz, I just posted that. Sometimes people add comments here. You can see we have a new person joining the group, and a couple of other people added a few little comments there. And there are probably a few more people I probably ought to add to the group too. But it's also a nice way of keeping in touch. Once you've got the group set up, you know that if you send a message, most people in the group will then see the message that you send out. So I use it as well for sending out notes about family tree DNA sales.
Debbie, you control who is a member of the group, is that correct?
Yes, people have to apply. People have to apply to join.
Right.
Or you can invite people as well. You have to be friends with a person for you to be able to add them to the group. If you're friends with someone, you can add them. Otherwise, you have to send them a message and invite them to join.
And I've seen groups like this having trouble with spurious posts. Do you have any experience like that?
Yes, you can delete the posts. I don't know
Both the posts and the member?
You can delete the posts and the member if you want, yes. I've had a few problems with spammers. There was a spate of people trying to sell shoes. And I don't know why they wanted to keep posting messages about their shoes they were offering. And I've also with the Guild group, we have some peculiar people applying to join that and some of the other groups. You can tell that I've had a few where they're males and they have pictures of women on their page, often very scantily clad, and there's often Chinese names, and you wonder why are they trying to join our Guild group.
It's in their DNA.
And often you'll see, if you look at their profile, they're members of like 600 or more groups, and you can see they're just going around spamming all the groups. But you can report posts as spam, and you can also block someone from a group. So if someone posts a spam message, then you can block it. Well, the other problem, of course, is you do get some people whose accounts are hacked, and they could publish spam by mistake. So you want to be a bit careful about if you are banning someone that they're not being banned because they have their account hacked. Now, we've talked about setting up lots of websites and creating an online profile. The next stage is to actually go out and advertise all the websites that you've created, and to advertise the existence of your One Name Study or your DNA project. There are various places where you can add listings. The Family History Societies are a good place to start. They often have their members' interest lists online. Syndis List now is another good place. They've got a dedicated page for DNA projects, so you can get your DNA project listed there. You'll find all these links on this ISOL wiki page promoting your DNA projects. Graham Jownay has a surname project listing where you can add your surname. The RootsWeb surname list, I've not had much success with that, but it's, I think everything is worth trying because you just never know where the inquiries are going to come from. I have a profile set up on MyHeritage. And also lost cousins, again, that's not something I've had a great deal of success with, but I just tend to try everything that's out there. We've also got the message boards and the mailing lists. The message boards, the surname lists often get gatewayed through to mailing lists anyway. Roots Chat, I would say, is the most useful of the message boards. If you haven't used Roots Chat, then you should have a go. They have a dedicated board where you can post your one-name study links, and there's also now a new board for discussing DNA projects. That was we had problems there a few weeks ago with some trolls who were creating all sorts of problems, and we had a whole thread on DNA bunkum that had to be moved into quarantine because people were getting so abusive to each other. But generally, that's a good place to. And the mailing list is another good way of reaching out and advertising your project. You have to be careful on some of the mailing lists that you don't contravene the rules that have been set up by the administrator. Some people refuse to allow any mention of DNA on their mailing lists, and others are quite happy to do so. You have to check the requirements before you start posting anything.
Yeah, am I correct with the guild profile page and the family tree that you can link each together?
Yes, you can. On the profile page, there is a section for DNA projects, so you can write a short paragraph about your DNA project, and then you can include a link to your Family Tree DNA website. And on your Family Tree DNA website, you can then link back to your profile page. And with the more websites you set up, you can get more to link to each other. And it's actually having all those interlinks that helps to raise your Google ranking. So the more places you can get your websites listed, the higher up the Google rankings you will be. And I think my blog and my profile, if I put in the name Cruise, C-R-U-W-Y-S, I'm number 1 and 2. It's more, I have much more difficulty with the C-R-U-I-S-E because I get lots of cruise ships and Tom Cruise.
Unfortunately, I'm getting by with Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury. That's terrible.
And the Roots web list, you'll find the other useful place to go are there are lots of lists for various counties and countries and all the states in America. So if you're looking for trying to find a candidate from a particular tree and you know that it's in Alabama or wherever, then those are good places to go just to try and post a message. The other thing to consider is to try writing articles for various magazines. That you can write a little piece for your local family history society, or just even submit a members query. You can try writing articles for the big Family Tree magazines. Who Do You Think You Are magazine, Family Tree magazine. Family Tree magazine also have some small ads. I know members in the past have used that. I don't know how effective that is today to place an advertisement, but some people have tried to do that. And if you're trying to recruit in a particular area, you can try sending a letter to the local newspaper. So the articles can be used as a marketing tool as well. I've written articles, I did some for Family History magazine when it was published. I've written things for various family history societies. I found the response not that brilliant, but each article seems to help to, it brings in a few inquiries, and the fact that you've written the articles gives your project more credibility. You can then link to those articles and it gives an explanation. The fact you've had the articles published gives people more confidence in the validity of your project. The methods we've discussed so far are ways of really advertising your project and sort of telling people that it exists, but there comes a time where you're looking for people from a specific line and you then have to do targeted promotions to try and track down the right people. So to do that, you'll want to build up a list of email contacts. You can contact people on Facebook, Genes Reunited, all the social networking websites, Ancestry. It's worth trying to trawl message boards and mailing lists, and you can just do a general search of the internet, trying to track down the elusive people that you want. Facebook, if you're looking for people, I find is the best place to start, so long as it's a rare surname or a rare forename. you'll likely find that someone is on Facebook, or if they're not on Facebook themselves, they'll have a son or daughter, and you can usually work out from the BMD indexes who's who, and then you can contact them and say, can you put me in touch with Auntie so-and-so. And the final thing to consider is that not everyone is online, as we would hope. Apparently, in the most recent statistics from the Office for National Statistics, 83% of homes in the UK have internet access, but that still leaves 17% of homes without internet access, and that constitutes 4 million homes. And it's mostly the older age group, only a third of over 65s are now online. So if that elusive person that you want is not online, doesn't have a son or daughter on Facebook, you are then going to have to put pen to paper and write a letter to contact them. And for that, we're now reliant on finding addresses in the online telephone directories or on 192.com, but it's much more difficult to do that these days because so many people opt out of the edited version of the electoral register, and so many people have ex-directory telephone numbers. There is a page in the wiki. Some members have had very high success rates doing targeted mail shots, and others don't seem to have had so much success at all. So I really don't know what to advise on that, but if you're just trying to contact one specific person, then I think it's worth a try, but the cost is probably not worth it if you're trying to target lots of people.
Debbie, I couldn't find my past living relatives. I found something that I couldn't find elsewhere.
Oh, did you? Oh, right. I don't have a Find My Past subscription. I even use Ancestry.
It's only, I don't, until you find living relatives, you actually have to pay for.
Right.
It's not a Find My Past subscription. You have to pay for it. It's not terribly expensive, but you can get a pretty good idea as to whether it's the person you want before you actually pay the money.
Is that the same data that's on 192.com?
I think it's a contract between them, yes.
Is it?
Yes.
Mm.
So it's a way of trying to find them first.
But it's 3 within the subscription
Oh,
before you have to actually pay extra.
right. Because on 192.com you can quite often work out who's who just from the bare details that are there, and you could, because they give you the households, don't they? But it's very expensive trying to extract all the names from 192 because you have to pay for the
Used to be
subscription.
nice, they used to give it to you free.
Yeah, they haven't done that for a while. And the info discs, I've got an old one from, I think it's 2002, but I've got a pared down version and I can't search for a whole surname. I have to do limited searches and I have to plug in the name and an initial, and it takes forever to extract any information. At the Amersham seminar, Rodney Brackstone said that he'd found the info discs on eBay. If you look on eBay for info discs, they always go for a large sum of money. But apparently, if you search for Family Tree Maker, an old version of Family Tree Maker, info disc is thrown in for free, and the people don't realise they've got info disc and it's selling for lots of money. So it can sometimes be worth buying an old issue of Family Tree Maker just to get the info disc.
That information is in the next one.
Oh, is it? Oh, right, okay. Right, so
In terms of recruiting, any kind of advice in terms of when you're doing this targeted recruitment, the kind of message that gets, or how you suggest to people that might join your DNA project? What works, what doesn't work?
Right, there's a I would recommend reading, there's a very nice little booklet in the members' room that
Right.
Peter Amsden wrote called, I think it's Contacting Your Relatives.
Right, okay.
And you can just download it as a PDF. He wrote letters to people and claimed a 50% success rate, and he just sent out a very simple form asking people to provide information about their family.
Right.
I would suggest it's not a good idea when writing to someone for the first time, ask them to say, I'm doing a DNA project, can we have your DNA? You want to try and establish the contact first before you then start introducing the idea of DNA testing. And some of those people won't reply immediately anyway. But I know Susan Meets has done a lot of mail shots, and she says that sometimes she gets responses to letters she wrote many, many years ago. Sometimes people keep the letters, they pass on, but the relative sorts out the papers and then they might respond.
Okay, right.
Susan has actually covered in the last 3 journals sections on how to actually recruit people.
Oh, right, okay.
And she's got another one coming up in the next journal.
Yeah, she will actually, if you want to contact Susan, she does actually offer advice on marketing campaigns and does provide letters that you can use or you can adapt for your own purposes. She seems to very much favour the mail shot approach, but I prefer the sort of internet presence approach. I haven't had to resort to sending out lots of letters at the moment. Okay. Right, the last thing we're going to look at this afternoon, I'm sure you've had enough by now, are some of the resources that you can use to help you understand DNA and to help you with your DNA project. The ISOG Wiki is one of the useful resources, which I'll just give you a quick guide through with. You've got themed sections here: autosomal DNA, mitochondrial DNA, Y-DNA, and also a special area for project administrators. You can also search the contents page, which is arranged thematically, and there's an index, which is an alphabetical index of all the pages, and you've got the main articles on the front page. One useful resource is a list of all the various mailing lists and forums that you can join. The ones I would recommend as for project administrators, the ISOG mailing list of project administrators. You've got lots of very experienced administrators on that list who've been through it all before, so any question you have, there's always going to be someone who can answer. And also the ISOG Facebook group, if you're on Facebook, that's a very, very active group. Lots of interesting DNA stories posted in there and interesting discussions. There is a Y-DNA Projects mailing list and a Facebook group for Y-DNA Project administrators. And then there are also all these specialist groups for adoptees and all sorts of other things. And if you like forums, Anthrogenica is the best forum. They're more interested in deep ancestry than the surname project. So. This is the project administrator area in the wiki. There are lots of resources there on the page of online resources and project administrators, and there's also a page on promoting the DNA project that links to all the places where you can advertise your project and various other pages that might be of use there. And in the members room we have a special DNA section where there are lots of articles, and also a number of members published papers on their studies, and some of their papers are well worth reading. That you'll find that in the members room in the information section, and it's also well worth looking at the wiki, where there's also a number of DNA articles and links. And that's the end. So, does anyone have any questions after all that?
Can I just see if I've got markers straight?
Yeah.
What exactly a marker is? Is it a sequence of bases that tends to be the same?
There are two different markers, okay? The one marker is that when you have a DNA test, you get a string of 37 numbers.
Yes.
Each of those numbers represents your result for a marker, which is a YSTR marker. And the STR markers are repeating sequences of A, C's, T's and G's.
Yes.
So if you have 17 repeating sequences, then you get a number 17 for that particular marker. Okay? So that's one marker. Those are the markers for matching purposes, for close matching for genealogy. The other markers are called SNPs, and those are the single letter changes in the DNA code, and they're very rare, and those are the markers that define the branches on the family tree. They determine the haplogroups. It's confusing, they're both called markers, but you have to, it's an important distinction you have to understand. Those are really the only technical terms you have to know, STRs and SNPs, and the difference between the two. And they're both useful in their own way.
You said family tree the DNA samples for 25 years.
Yes.
So if there's advances in, and there are always advances in the things. So that if we want to go from 37 to 100 or 120, whatever number they come up with, they can still use that. You just have to pay the extra. Of
You just have to pay for the new test. In theory, it doesn't always work that way. Bennett Greenspan, apparently his father died. Bennett Greenspan's the head of Family Tree DNA. When he wanted to get a family finder test done on his father, there was not enough DNA to use for the test. I mean, if you've got someone who is the last of the line and you really want to have their DNA preserved, probably the cheapest way to do it is just order an extra 12 marker test for $49 and just have the DNA stored. It's the autosomal DNA test. The family finder test looks at 750,000 markers, no, 700,000 markers, and that uses a lot of DNA. If within 5 years, perhaps, we'll be sequencing the whole genome. So that will be a lot of DNA, but they're also refining the process all the time. So the tests now don't use as much DNA as they did in the past because they amplify it. There's a word for it which I can't remember, but I thought Morris might be able to help me out there.
I'm the only one to have access to my own DNA sample there, right? Nobody else can get at it.
Well, if you join a project, then the administrators of the projects that you belong to will access virtually everything that you can access. You're given a kit number and a password, so if you want, you can share that with other family members.
Right.
I think you mean the FBI, actually.
Yeah, no, Patrick, that
The project administrators are told that even though they have access to all of their members' private pages, they should never order any additional tests for a project member without getting the consent of the project member beforehand.
And also there are certain things you can't do, even as a project administrator. You can't change the primary email address, for instance. So if someone's been interfering with the page, you can actually change the password, and the project administrator can't do anything about it. But I mean, it's rare to find a rogue project administrator, but these things do sometimes happen.
And you can set in your own personal pages how much access you want the project administrator to have to your personal private pages.
You can also set up there's a form for a beneficiary, so that you can nominate someone to assume responsibility for your particular kit after your demise. And in fact, even since I started in 2007, I've had a lot of project members who've passed away in that time. And some of those I've got in my Devon project. I have a Giffard who is the end of his line after several thousand years. Not several hundred years. He had the only one from this tree, and he had 2 daughters. But his DNA is still preserved in the project, still waiting for a match. So, perhaps 10, 20 years, the answer will come along. You just don't know.
In terms of the kind of upgrade costs, so if you've got the basic kit with 37 markers, then what's the cost of them, say, a 67 or 111?
Oh, I can't remember offhand.
Yeah, we don't know, depending on sale.
It's on the it's in your administration pages. If you go into the project administration, and I think it's one of the last ones on the bottom. It actually gives you all the prices for the test, but also the upgrades for the test.
Right.
If I remember correctly, I think it's about $99 to go from 37 to 67.
Yes, and it's quite a bit more to go up to 111.
Right.
Yeah.
But they do occasionally have upgrade sales, normally about once a year, and they knock about $20 off the price.
If somebody has died, but you've still got, say, in your wardrobe some of their clothes, is it possible that there might be some hairs, and could that be used?
It's very, very difficult to use things like that. One of the problems is contamination. You don't know if it's an item of clothing, someone else could have had contact with it. If it's a hair, someone else could have brushed it beside the hair. It may not be their DNA.
Yeah.
The process of extracting the DNA is very costly. It counts as forensic DNA, so it's the same as the police have to do. it has to go to a specialist lab where they have to wear all the special suits and everything, and make sure that there's no cross-contamination. So it costs you a huge amount of money, and the success rate is actually very low. So you could end up paying a lot of money and getting no results.
I can confirm that because that's what exactly Susan Meeks wrote to. Somebody who found behind a photograph a lock of hair, and they wrote to me and said, and I said, well, I really don't know the answer to that. I suggest you contact Susan. I CC'd Susan, and she said exactly the same. It's really expensive,
But
and limited result.
But if you've got something like a tooth was used for Richard III, that would, if you've got like a baby tooth or something, that could be used.
But I've kept my son's baby teeth.
But you can't submit a sample for someone else. So if your son decided he didn't want to do a DNA test, you wouldn't be allowed, by law, you were not allowed to submit a sample like that. You have to get his permission. It's a different case when with Richard III when he died years ago. You don't have to get consent.
Some people have raised the possibility of exhuming bodies as well to get the DNA, and the cost of that has been estimated at approximately £20,000 to exhume the body and extract the DNA.
They're proposing that, aren't they, for Alfred the Great?
Yes.
Well, this is more recent. People, Roberta Estes has written a blog about it because she was considering the possibility of doing it with one of her relatives, and somebody else in the book that I've read recently was also considering doing the same thing, but you're looking at £20,000.
And the other thing is that you have to get permission, certainly in this country, from the church authorities before the exhumation can even go ahead. And in most cases that isn't forthcoming. So the prince is in the tower in, I think it's Westminster Abbey, and people have been trying to get permission to exhume their bodies, and the Queen won't allow it. No?
Terry, both you and Morris have variants on Noah's DNA project. Can we have a general discussion as to whether it's worthwhile adding variants, or the more names you've got, are you going to get more hits, which will help you with your main line?
Well, I think with the DNA project, it's worth adding more variants than you are using in your one name study, because it gives you a wider picture, and you don't necessarily have to do all the detailed research on those extra variants. So I've got more variants in my DNA project than I'm actually studying, although I find my one name study seems to keep accumulating too many variants than I can cope with. But it is a useful way. You can just explore a few variants and test a few people, and if there's no match, you know that it's not worth bothering to pursue that variant. And sometimes it can also, the DNA tester can introduce new variants that you hadn't expected. In my project we had a match with the surnames Cruz and Screws, which I hadn't even realised was a surname, but it's a surname in America and not in the UK.
What could you do to reverse the process? What if you added a variant and suddenly you got more hits than you can handle? Can you remove that name from your project?
Split it to two.
I suppose you could split it off into another project, yes. But just having the people in your project is not a lot of work, because once results have come in and you've just written to them to tell them about their matches, they just sit there and you don't have to do anything else with them. It's not like a one-name study where someone writes to you and you may have to try and research their whole tree to give them a reply.
I think that's what I was trying to get a sense of, the comparison with a one-name study, whether if you went down that road you might regret it.
No,
or not, as the case may be.
No, and at the barest minimum, if you've got someone in your project, all you need to ask them is the details of their most distant known ancestor. You don't have to collect any other information if you don't want to. Although it does help for other researchers to have that information on file. That's why I record all the pedigrees on my trees, at least I got them there. And it's easier to get the information when you first have the contact with someone. If you try and go back 2 years later, you find they don't respond, or they've moved on, or the email address has changed.
I think the other thing is that you very rarely get project administrators complaining that they have too many people in their project. So that's one point. The other point about variance is that certainly in my Spearman project it was essential to include additional variants, some of which I hadn't thought of previously. The reason being that with the transition and migration of people over to America, as soon as they get to America, their surname was changed to a different spelling as soon as they crossed into Ellis Island. So a lot of my Spearins became Spearings. And in actual fact, most of the participants, as we saw, are probably people in the old colonies, Canada, America, Australia. So a lot of them would have changed their surname, or Clark on admission would have changed their surname. And of course, back then, certainly in Ireland and probably in England as well, spelling was not standardized. So, for example, Shakespeare spelled his name 16 different ways. And it's the same with the Spearin surname. I found 3 variants of the surname on a single birth certificate. So people didn't know how to spell, and people writing down the information on the birth and marriage and death records didn't know how to spell either. And they frequently would just use variants that came to that they would use the spelling how it sounded. They would spell it how it sounded.
Yeah, but where you have a county like I have, like Norfolk, where the accent or dialect is quite broad, and you have a curate who is what I call English instead of East Anglian. In other words, a foreigner. Who comes in, he doesn't half the people are illiterate, and he doesn't understand what they're saying, so he writes down what he thinks they're saying. I mean, that's how most of my variants come in.
Yeah.
Which sound the same, but are spelled different.
Well, the DNA can pick that up. I found in my Devon project, I've had matches with people where I hadn't realised that the surname was 2 different variants. I had the name, I think it's pronounced Smalley, S-M-A-L-L-E-Y, which matched with the name Smale. And it hadn't occurred to me that they might be related, but then once the match came through, I realised it probably did make sense that they both had the same root.
I think you also have to take into account. So I just wanted to add, you also have to take into account that the English that we speak now is very different to the English that was spoken so long years ago. Shakespeare would have rhymed the word love, and we pronounce it, with the word move, for instance.
And also surnames, the pronunciation of surnames can change within families. In my study in Australia, they decided to change the pronunciation of Cruz, and they pronounced it Cruis, because they didn't want the name to sound Germanic. And my grandfather changed his surname. He was a Ratty, and he changed his name, he added an E, and he became Ratey. And that's just within the last 100 years.
I think we really must say thank you very much for these 2 wonderful people. I think we've had a lovely afternoon. I'm sure I know a lot more about DNA. Every time I hear something, I learn and understand it much better. But I think this afternoon I've gone in leaps and bounds as to how much I understand. It has been a fantastic afternoon. Thank you both very, very much indeed. And we really say thank you.